Jalen fumbled with the straps of his luggage for what felt like the 100th time, muttering to himself about how humans were never meant to travel beyond their own clumsy gravity. Leora hovered nearby, her long ears twitching with amusement as she leaned casually against the shimmering wall of the starport. "You do realize I can see every ounce of panic radiating off you, right?" she said, her voice lilting like music tuned to a scale Jalen couldn't name. He froze, imagining a heat map of embarrassment projected around him, before grinning sheepishly. "I'm not panicking," he lied, though his knuckles were white. "I'm preparing for cultural immersion." "Cultural immersion," she repeated, and one of her ears quivered. "That's a new one. Usually humans just call it sweating and tripping over everything." Her chuckle was infectious, and Jalen couldn't help but laugh, a sound that echoed awkwardly against the polished metal of the docking bay. They boarded the starship, a sleek vessel that looked less like a vehicle and more like a living organism. The walls pulsed faintly with light, responding to the passengers' emotions, or so Leora claimed. Jalen spent the first 5 minutes trying not to stare too openly at the floors, which shifted underfoot in a subtle, undulating rhythm that made him feel slightly seasick and slightly enchanted. "Are you sure it's safe?" he asked, gripping a railing that shimmered like liquid mercury. "It's perfectly safe," Leora said, floating past him with the casual grace of someone who had spent centuries moving without ever needing to touch the ground. "You just have to trust it and maybe stop imagining it's going to eat you." She smirked, and Jalen imagined the floor opening like a trapdoor beneath him. Hours later, they descended onto Leora's homeworld. The landscape that unfolded was like a dream painted by a dozen different suns. Glowing forests stretched endlessly, their bioluminescent leaves rippling in colors he didn't have names for. Rivers hovered above the ground, defying gravity in lazy arcs, reflecting light in a way that made him squint in awe. Cities spiraled upward around enormous crystalline trees, their branches twisting impossibly into the sky, shimmering as if the very air was infused with electricity. "Welcome to my world," Leora said, and this time her ears twitched in a way that suggested genuine delight. She nudged him gently. "Try not to stare like a fool." Jalen's attempts at composure faltered immediately. His first step was onto one of the floating rivers, which he misjudged and fell backward with a flailing arms display that would have been laughable if it weren't so spectacularly graceful from a human disaster perspective. Leora caught him effortlessly, her fingers brushing his arm with an elegance that made him flush. "Smooth," she teased. "You're like a newborn gravity animal." As they approached her home, Jalen noticed that even the doors seemed alive, pulsing with colors and responding to their presence. He hesitated at the entrance, half expecting a polite interrogation from some sentient mechanism. Leora nudged him forward. "Just greet the house," she said, rolling her eyes. "It's easier than making small talk with my mother, and almost as scary." Inside, the family was waiting. Leora's parents were tall, elegant, and radiated a quiet authority. Their ears were long and tapered, much like Leora's, and they moved in ways that seemed almost choreographed, twitching and flicking as if in constant conversation with the air itself. Jalen bowed awkwardly, offering a smile that he hoped passed for confidence rather than terror. "Jalen," Leora's mother said, her voice smooth and melodic, "we are pleased to meet you." Her ears flicked once, and Jalen instinctively looked for hidden cameras or monitors, realizing a moment too late that she was merely observing him with an intensity that made him feel like a bug under a very polite microscope. Dinner was an experience Jalen would never forget. The table floated in midair, dishes shifting slightly as if alive. Some of the food moved of its own volition, curling and wriggling in subtle ways that made him jump on more than one occasion. Leora whispered, "Don't worry, it's polite to respond to their flavors mentally." Jalen tried, concentrating hard, and felt an almost comedic wave of sensations: spicy excitement, bitter disapproval, a hint of pride. He coughed, hoping no one noticed the mental equivalent of choking. Despite the strangeness, laughter seeped in through the cracks of tension. When a small, luminescent crustacean on his plate began to hum a jaunty tune, Jalen laughed so hard he nearly floated off his chair, prompting Leora's younger sibling to snort and twirl away in zero gravity. It was chaotic, it was confusing, and yet it was beautiful. By the time the evening ended, Jalen's initial fear had ebbed into a mixture of awe and reluctant enjoyment. He had survived floating rivers, mentally interactive food, and the quiet telepathic observations of an entire family. As they floated together outside the house, bioluminescent plants swaying around them like gentle fireworks, Jalen whispered, "I think I'm going to need a guidebook." Leora laughed, her ears flicking joyfully. "You're already doing better than most humans, and trust me, the guidebook would be more confusing than helpful." She took his hand, and for the first time, Jalen felt less like a visitor and more like someone who could belong in this world, even if he had no idea what he was doing half the time. The stars above shimmered in unfamiliar constellations, and for the first time, he felt that maybe, just maybe, love could survive across galaxies, even if his two left feet kept trying to defy gravity. The next morning, Jalen woke to the soft hum of the house itself, a gentle vibration that seemed to pulse through the floor and walls like a heartbeat. Leora's ears twitched as she stretched beside him, yawning in a way that made him momentarily forget he was still very much in an alien household. "Good morning," she said, her voice playful, "and welcome to day 2 of How Not to Offend My Family Before Breakfast." Jalen rolled over and rubbed his eyes, trying to summon some dignity, but his voice betrayed him before his mind could. "I think I failed spectacularly yesterday," he admitted, glancing around at the shifting walls that seemed to observe him as he spoke. Leora laughed, a low, musical sound that echoed faintly in the room. "Spectacularly is a high bar. Congratulations, you've set the tone for the rest of your stay." Breakfast was no less intimidating than dinner. Floating plates hovered just out of reach, rotating gently, and Jalen's first instinct was to lunge, only to realize the moment was entirely wrong. Leora's younger sibling zipped by, scooping up a hovering slice of crystalline fruit and flicking it toward Jalen. It wobbled midair before he caught it awkwardly, and the fruit responded with a polite shiver of delight, like it had been tickled. He almost dropped it. "Okay, got it," he muttered. "Don't make the fruit unhappy, noted." The family began their morning rituals, and Jalen was pressed into participation. They moved through the house in a sort of choreographed dance, where every step, glance, and ear flick communicated more than words ever could. At first, he panicked, tripping over invisible cues, bumping into walls that pulsed when he got too close, and misreading telepathic gestures as disapproval. "I swear, the house is conspiring against me," he whispered to Leora, who merely rolled her eyes and nudged him forward with a finger that passed through his shoulder without harm, a reminder of how alien yet seamless her world could be. By mid-morning, he was learning small victories. He managed to bow at the correct angle without causing a wall to change color violently, and he even complimented the ambient lighting, which Leora's mother acknowledged with what Jalen thought might have been a telepathic chuckle. Encouraged, he attempted a joke about gravity which landed surprisingly well, earning a ripple of laughter from the hovering breakfast plates. "Congratulations," Leora said. "You've just made the food laugh. That's progress." Later, they explored the gardens outside. Bioluminescent plants swayed in rhythm to sounds that Jalen couldn't hear but felt in his chest. Leora's sibling challenged him to a game involving levitating chess pieces that snapped at the fingers of inattentive players. Every move required careful mental coordination, and Jalen discovered that his human reflexes, while slow, had a peculiar knack for predicting the pieces, sudden lunges. He won one round, only to have a small cluster of luminescent flowers applaud him by spinning in midair and showering him with sparkling pollen. "It's raining glitter," he exclaimed, causing Leora to snort and flick her ear. As the day progressed, Jalen began to understand more of the subtle pressures and expectations of Leora's family. They prized intelligence, empathy, and a deftness of humor as much as skill in navigating their complex world. He learned about interstellar politics, the importance of maintaining harmony among planets with delicate resources, and the role of memory projection in preserving family history. One demonstration left him dizzy and laughing. Ancestors' memories projected as three-dimensional holographic tapestries, interactive and vivid, with Jalen accidentally walking through a representation of an alien festival, causing a minor disruption that left him apologizing to a holographic elder who winked at him telepathically. The afternoon brought a lesson in etiquette that bordered on absurdity. Jalen was asked to taste test a beverage that subtly altered the drinker's emotional output for those nearby. Concentrating on appearing confident, he sipped it and immediately felt his nervousness amplified, only to discover that the effect transmitted as empathy to everyone around him. Leora's mother quirked an eyebrow, Leora's sibling giggled uncontrollably, and Jalen shrieked, waving his hands, trying to appear dignified. "Congratulations," Leora said, suppressing laughter. "You've made an emotional splash." Despite the challenges, moments of connection shone through. Jalen noticed small smiles when he intuitively placed a hovering cup back on its stand, laughter when he misjudged the hovering of a pet-like plant, and quiet approval when he navigated a minor telepathic misunderstanding without causing offense. Each success, no matter how tiny, bolstered his confidence. Leora's family, while still reserved, began to include him more naturally in conversations, teasing him gently in ways that made him feel accepted rather than judged. By evening, Jalen was exhausted but exhilarated. Leora led him to a quiet terrace, glowing flora swaying under the twin moons. "You survived day 2, she said, her long ears flicking with satisfaction. "Barely, but you survived." He laughed, feeling a strange pride in his clumsy victories, and marveled at how much he had learned in just a single day, about the family, the culture, and himself. As they sat together, watching the floating rivers shimmer under alien starlight, Jalen realized that while the world was strange and full of challenges, he was beginning to belong. The lessons had been humbling, the humor had kept him sane, and the bond with Leora had grown stronger. For the first time, he felt the faint thrill of anticipation for what tomorrow might bring, knowing that even more bizarre customs and adventures awaited, and that somehow he would face them, ears twitching along with hers. Jalen awoke to the hum of the house once again, but this morning it felt less like a foreign heartbeat and more like a gentle companion. Leora was already up, her long ears twitching with energy as she floated above the floor, arms folded behind her head. "Ready for the big finale?" she asked, eyes sparkling with mischief. Jalen groaned, rubbing his temples. "If by big finale you mean more hovering furniture and emotionally sensitive food, I think I'm ready to negotiate terms." She laughed, the sound bouncing lightly off the shifting walls, and Jalen felt a strange thrill at how naturally humor now threaded through even the strangest of alien rituals. Their first task of the day involved assisting in the ceremonial preparation of the family's memory archive, a process more complex than any Jalen had imagined. Holographic projections of ancestors flickered around them, some gossiping with each other in quiet flashes of color, others observing with curiosity. Jalen was initially overwhelmed, but this time, he let his instincts guide him. When a mischievous memory sprite tried to tangle his reflection into a kaleidoscope of embarrassment, he laughed instead of panicking and offered a playful comment that had the sprite spinning with delight. Leora's parents watched, a faint shimmer of amusement on their faces, and for the first time, Jalen realized he wasn't just surviving their world, he was participating in it. Next came a test of etiquette involving interplanetary diplomacy. A minor dispute had arisen between neighboring regions over floating resource zones, and the family expected him to demonstrate tact. Jalen's first instinct was to panic, but he drew on the lessons of the past 2 days. He cracked a joke about human bureaucracy versus floating resource claims, prompting a ripple of laughter and easing the tension. Then, speaking carefully, he navigated the discussion with humility and curiosity, asking questions that revealed more about the underlying concerns than he could have from an outsider's perspective. By the end, the minor dispute was transformed into an opportunity for cooperation, and Leora's family shared quiet nods of approval. Humor threaded through the day as much as diplomacy. Jalen accidentally triggered a hovering chandelier to spin wildly while trying to demonstrate a simple greeting gesture, sending a cascade of harmless, sparkling motes across the room. Everyone froze, and then laughter erupted, human and alien alike, filling the home with warmth. Leora's younger sibling high-fived him midair, and even the normally stoic parents chuckled, their ears flicking in rhythm to their amusement. It was a moment that perfectly captured the blend of chaos and connection that defined his journey. Later, Leora led Jalen to a quiet terrace overlooking a river of floating luminescence. "You've done more than survive here," she said softly, her ears twitching with pride. "You've learned to see, to understand, and to laugh at yourself while doing it." Jalen gazed at the iridescent currents, his mind reflecting on everything he had experienced: the chaotic dinners, the memory projections, the playful battles with sentient plants, and the delicate dance of etiquette that had once terrified him. He realized that he had grown not just in skill or knowledge, but in patience, empathy, and confidence. He could navigate this alien world without panic. He could engage with minds that weren't his own and connect across gaps he had once assumed insurmountable. The evening brought a private family council, where Leora's parents formally acknowledged Jalen's place in their circle. They asked questions, not tests, probing gently to understand his character, his hopes, and his willingness to embrace their world fully. Jalen answered honestly, mixing humility with humor, and when a particularly serious moment threatened to heighten tension, he diffused it with a quip about humans and anti-gravity etiquette. Leora's mother smiled, a telepathic echo of approval washing over him, and he felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the ambient energy of the house. As night fell, the family gathered for a small celebration. Floating lanterns glimmered in the air, sending ripples of color across the terrace, and small creatures of light hovered near Jalen, responding to his presence with curiosity. Leora held his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, and Jalen realized that the connection he had feared might never survive had transformed into something stronger and more resilient than he could have imagined. The lessons he had learned, the patience, the observation, the humor, the empathy, had made him part of this world, even as he remained fully himself. The final moments of the night were quiet. Jalen and Leora drifted above the glowing flora, watching the twin moons reflect on floating rivers below. He laughed softly at a memory of his first disastrous fall into the hovering stream, and she nudged him gently with an amused flick of her ear. "You've changed," she whispered, "not just because you survived, but because you grew." Jalen smiled, feeling an unfamiliar serenity, a sense of belonging that stretched beyond gravity, culture, or galaxy. "I guess I did," he admitted, glancing at her, "and somehow it was fun." As they floated side by side, the stars above shimmering in alien constellations, Jalen understood that love had indeed bridged the gap between their worlds. Not perfectly, not without effort, and certainly not without humor, but in a way that made both of them whole. For the first time, he didn't feel like a visitor or an outsider. He felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be, with someone who had taught him that